What if I told you that one of the most profound science fiction films ever made wasn't about conquering space or defeating aliens, but about a man slowly disappearing into nothingness? The Incredible Shrinking Man wasn't just another creature feature. It was a philosophical nightmare wrapped in groundbreaking special effects, where humanity's greatest enemy was existence itself. But behind the oversized props and tarantula terror was a writer's personal crisis, a director's genius, and studio executives who almost destroyed one of cinema's most haunting endings. These are 20 incredible facts about The Incredible Shrinking Man, the film that asked what it means to exist when you're too small to matter. Before we shrink down into the madness, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into classic cinema. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Now let's get into it. Number 1. Born from a master of horror. Before Scott Carey ever started shrinking, Richard Matheson was shrinking too. At least that's how he felt. The 1956 novel that became this film was written by Matheson himself, who also penned the screenplay. This wasn't just another sci-fi gig for him. Matheson would go on to write I Am Legend and craft some of the most memorable episodes of The Twilight Zone. But The Incredible Shrinking Man was personal. It was his fear, his crisis, his voice screaming into the void. And Universal had no idea what they were about to unleash. Number 2. The director who owned the genre. When Universal needed someone to bring Matheson's nightmare to life, they turned to the only man who could pull it off, Jack Arnold. By 1957, Arnold was already a sci-fi legend. He'd terrified audiences with Creature from the Black Lagoon and mesmerized them with It Came from Outer Space. His gift wasn't just making monsters look real, it was making you feel the terror in your bones. Arnold knew how to turn rubber suits and cardboard sets into pure dread. And with The Incredible Shrinking Man, he was about to prove he could do something even harder, make you afraid of empty space. Number 3. A war veteran's inner battle. The film's concept didn't come from aliens or atomic age paranoia. It came from something far more intimate. Richard Matheson's own experience of feeling powerless after returning from World War II. He described it as shrinking, both figuratively and emotionally. A sense that the world had moved on without him, that he was becoming smaller, less significant, invisible. That existential dread seeped into every page of his novel and every frame of the film. Scott Carey wasn't just a man getting physically smaller. He was every veteran, every husband, every person who ever felt like they were disappearing while the world kept spinning. Number 4. Philosophy in a monster movie. In the 1950s, science fiction meant one thing: monsters, giant ants, radioactive blobs, invaders from Mars. But The Incredible Shrinking Man dared to be different. It was one of the first sci-fi films to use existentialism as its central theme. This wasn't about defeating the creature. It was about identity, purpose, and what it means to be human when humanity itself starts slipping away. The film asked questions most movies were too scared to touch. If you're too small to be seen, do you still exist? If you can't connect with anyone, are you still alive? Universal didn't know they were making a philosophy lecture disguised as a B-movie. But that's exactly what made it brilliant. Number 5. 2 Weeks with a Tarantula. The spider scene. If you've seen the film, you know. If you haven't, imagine being trapped in a basement with a creature the size of a car, all fangs and fury, hunting you across a concrete wasteland. That iconic sequence where Scott Carey battles the giant spider took over 2 weeks to film. 2 weeks of carefully choreographed terror using forced perspective, oversized web props, and one very real, very alive tarantula. The crew had to time every movement perfectly because one wrong step meant starting over. And Grant Williams? He was down there in the trenches, face to face with his 8-legged nightmare, knowing that if something went wrong, there was nowhere to run. Number 6. Old school magic. Forget CGI. Forget green screens. The Incredible Shrinking Man was made with pure cinematic sorcery. Most of the film's special effects were done in-camera using oversized props and multiple exposure shots. No computers, no composites, just clever camera work, forced perspective, and a team of magicians with too much coffee and not enough sleep. They had to get it right in the moment because there was no fixing it later. Every shot was a gamble, every frame was a miracle, and somehow it worked. The film looked more real, more terrifying, more heartbreaking than anything that came before it. Number 7. When props become mountains. To make Grant Williams look tiny, Universal didn't shrink him. They made the world massive. The production built giant props at enormous scale, matchboxes the size of refrigerators, pencils as tall as trees, sewing needles that could impale a man. Every ordinary object became a monument, a landscape, a weapon. The art department turned a suburban basement into an alien planet where a dropped pin sounded like thunder, and a mousetrap was a guillotine waiting to fall. It was painstaking, expensive, and utterly insane. But it gave the film a tactile reality that no amount of special effects could replicate today. Number 8. The actor who faced his fears. Grant Williams wasn't just acting scared during the spider fight, he was genuinely terrified. Williams had a real fear of spiders, but he performed most of his own stunts anyway, including that harrowing battle with the tarantula. No stunt doubles, no safety nets, just him, a very large arachnid, and a director yelling action between takes. Williams later said it was the most physically and emotionally demanding role of his career. He wasn't pretending to fight for his life. In those moments, staring into the cluster of eyes and fangs, he really was. That raw fear bled through every frame, and audiences felt it. Number 9. The title that sold a nightmare. The movie almost had a different name. The original working title was simply The Shrinking Man. Straightforward, factual, boring. Universal's marketing team knew it needed punch, it needed weight, it needed to grab you by the collar and drag you into the theater, so they added one word: incredible. Suddenly, it wasn't just a shrinking man, it was the incredible shrinking man. That one word transformed it from a curiosity into an event, a spectacle, a promise that what you were about to see would change the way you looked at the world. And for once, the marketing wasn't lying. Number 10. Engineering the impossible. Cinematographer Ellis W. Carter faced a problem no one had solved before. How do you film extreme forced perspective without breaking the illusion? The answer: invent new tools. Carter had to create special camera lenses specifically designed to manage the film's insane depth of field. He couldn't just point and shoot. Every angle had to account for props at wildly different scales existing in the same frame. One wrong calculation and the magic would shatter. So Carter built custom rigs, experimented with focal lengths that shouldn't have worked, and basically rewrote the rulebook on practical effects cinematography. His innovations are still studied in film schools today. Number 11. A modest budget, an immodest vision. The film cost around $750,000 to make. By 1957 standards, that was modest. Not cheap, but not extravagant either. Universal wasn't betting the farm on this one. They were hedging, playing it safe. But Jack Arnold and his team didn't play safe. They took that budget and created visual effects that were considered groundbreaking and decades ahead of their era. Every dollar was stretched, every shot was calculated, every prop was repurposed 3 times over. The film proved you didn't need a fortune to change cinema, you just needed vision, guts, and a refusal to accept the word impossible. Number 12. Science fiction's highest honor. When The Incredible Shrinking Man won the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, it made history. It was one of the earliest science fiction films ever to receive the honor. The Hugo wasn't just an award, it was the genre's stamp of approval, a signal that sci-fi could be art, that it could matter, that it deserved to be taken seriously. For years, science fiction had been dismissed as kid stuff, pulp nonsense, cheap thrills, but this film proved the doubters wrong. It earned its place not through spectacle alone, but through substance, through questions that lingered long after the lights came up. Number 13. An ending that still haunts. The final moments of The Incredible Shrinking Man are unlike anything in 1950s cinema. As Scott Carey shrinks beyond microscopic, beyond atomic, he doesn't rage or despair. He accepts, he realizes that to God there is no zero, that he will continue to exist, infinitely small, forever meaningful in the vast cosmic scale. It's philosophical, it's spiritual, it's terrifying and beautiful all at once. Critics still debate what it means. Some see hope, others see horror. That ambiguity, that refusal to give easy answers, made the ending one of the most profound conclusions in the entire decade of film. Number 14. The battle for the soul of the film. Richard Matheson didn't just write The Incredible Shrinking Man, he fought for it. Studio executives at Universal wanted a happy ending. They wanted Scott Carey cured, returned to normal size, reunited with his wife, roll credits, a neat little bow on a nightmare. But Matheson refused. He knew that kind of ending would betray everything the story stood for. He argued, he pushed back, he risked his career to protect the existential finale he'd envisioned. And somehow, miraculously, he won. The film kept its ending. Number 15. Props that refused to die. After The Incredible Shrinking Man wrapped production, Universal didn't throw away the giant props. They couldn't. They were too expensive, too meticulously crafted, too useful to just toss in a dumpster behind the studio lot. These weren't cheap cardboard cutouts. They were engineered works of art, massive matchboxes built with precise dimensions, pencils the size of telephone poles, needles that could actually pierce through foam and fabric. The art department had poured weeks of labor into making them look both oversized and realistic, and Universal's penny-pinching executives knew gold when they saw it. So the studio repurposed them, wheeling them out of storage whenever another low-budget production needed a quick visual gag or atmospheric set dressing. Those giant props started showing up everywhere. Background pieces in cheap sci-fi flicks about mad scientists, set decoration for low-budget horror shows where monsters prowled through suburban basements. They became the go-to solution whenever a director needed something bizarre, something unsettling, something that made audiences do a double take. Even years later, eagle-eyed fans watching late-night creature features would pause their VHS tapes and think, wait, is that the Matchbox from Shrinking Man? And they'd be right. It was Universal's way of squeezing every last drop of value from their investment, sure, but it was also a strange kind of immortality. Those props became part of Hollywood's DNA, ghosts from one film haunting dozens of others. They outlived the careers of most of the people who built them. They survived studio regime changes, format shifts from film to video, even the transition to digital effects, and in their own way, they kept the spirit of the incredible Shrinking Man alive, reminding viewers that once upon a time, movie magic was built by hand, not rendered on a computer. Number 16. The Spider That Changed Cinema. The spider scene didn't just terrify audiences when they first saw it in 1957. It rewrote the rulebook on creature horror and influenced filmmakers for generations to come. Directors didn't just watch that sequence, they studied it, they dissected it, they tried to understand how Jack Arnold built such suffocating tension without relying on gore or shock value. It was all about the approach, the slow, methodical way the camera follows the spider's movements, the way Arnold lets silence do the heavy lifting, allowing the audience's imagination to amplify their own fear, the primal terror of being hunted in your own home, in a space that should be safe, by something that sees you as nothing more than prey. You can see the scene's DNA in Ridley Scott's Alien, where the xenomorph stalks the Nostromo crew through shadowy corridors with the same patient, inevitable menace. Scott has admitted in interviews that he studied 1950s sci-fi horror, and the parallels are unmistakable. The tight spaces, the clicking sounds, the sense that nowhere is safe. You can feel it in Joe Johnston's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where oversized insects become living nightmares and ordinary backyards transform into hostile alien worlds. Even modern horror directors like James Wan and Ari Aster have cited the scene as an influence, proof that true terror doesn't need jump scares or buckets of blood. The spider scene proved a fundamental truth about horror. You don't need to show everything, you just need to make the audience feel small, vulnerable, helpless, like they're at the mercy of something bigger, something stronger, something that doesn't care if they live or die. That's the kind of fear that stays with you long after the credits roll. Number 17. The Voice That Elevated Everything. The narration by Grant Williams wasn't part of the original plan. In fact, it wasn't even in the script. The film was shot without any voiceover, designed to play out purely through visuals and dialogue. But when the filmmakers sat down to watch the rough cut, something felt missing. The film was visually stunning. Yes, the effects worked, the performances landed, but there was a distance, an emotional gap between Scott's internal journey and what audiences could access. They could see him shrinking, but they couldn't feel what it meant. That's when someone suggested adding narration, and Grant Williams was brought back to the studio to record it. He sat in a dark booth, with just the script and his own understanding of Scott Carey's doomed trajectory. Williams recorded the narration in long, contemplative takes, speaking as if from beyond existence itself, from some timeless void where size and significance had lost all meaning. His voice was haunting, poetic, almost biblical in its cadence and weight. That narration transformed the film from a clever special effects showcase into a genuine meditation on existence. It gave Scott's shrinking a spiritual dimension, turning a physical transformation into an existential crisis. Without that voice, The Incredible Shrinking Man would have been impressive, a technical achievement, a well-made thriller. With it, the film became unforgettable. It became philosophy. It became the kind of movie that lodges itself in your brain and refuses to leave, the kind that makes you stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. wondering if you matter, if anyone matters, if meaning exists at all when the universe is so incomprehensibly vast. Williams' narration didn't just add context, it added soul, and that made all the difference. Number 18. The Color Controversy. Here's something most people don't know. The film was originally shot in black and white. Jack Arnold's vision was stark, noirish, shadow-heavy. He wanted the basement scenes to feel claustrophobic, suffocating, like descending into a nightmare where light itself was dying. Black and white would have given the film that classic horror edge, turning every shadow into a threat and every corner into a void. But the studio had other plans. Universal decided to release it in color to capitalize on the growing sci-fi trend. Technicolor was the future. Color sold tickets. Color meant prestige and spectacle. Color screamed event film in a way black and white simply couldn't in 1957. So they processed the film, added tints, and released it in theaters as a full-color production. Some critics argue the black and white version would have been more atmospheric, more intimate, more aligned with Arnold's original vision of existential dread. The shadows would have been deeper, the isolation more profound. Others say the color gave it scope and spectacle, making the giant props pop and the spider sequence even more visceral and immediate. It turned a chamber piece into an epic. We'll never know for sure what the film would have felt like in pure black and white, but what we do know is that Universal was willing to gamble on anything, change anything, to make this film stand out in a crowded marketplace of sci-fi cheapies and monster movies. Number 19. Preserved for Eternity. In 2009, The Incredible Shrinking Man received the ultimate honor. It was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. This isn't just some participation trophy. The registry doesn't preserve every movie that comes along. It preserves culture, history, art, the films that define who we are and where we came from. Only films deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant make the cut, and the competition is fierce. Thousands of films are considered each year, but only a handful are chosen. And after more than 50 years, The Incredible Shrinking Man earned its place not as a nostalgic curiosity or a quaint relic of the atomic age, but as a genuine masterpiece. A film that changed what science fiction could be, what it could say, what it could make you feel. It proved that genre films weren't just escapism or cheap thrills. They could be profound. They could be poetry. The Library of Congress recognized what audiences had known all along. This film wasn't just entertainment. It was essential. A story that captured something fundamental about the human condition, about our fears of insignificance, our terror of being forgotten, our desperate need to matter in an indifferent universe. And now, thanks to its preservation, future generations will be able to experience that same existential awakening, that same creeping dread, that same impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, even at our smallest, we still mean something. Number 20. The remake that can't escape. For years, decades even, Hollywood has tried to remake The Incredible Shrinking Man, and for years, it's failed spectacularly. Eddie Murphy was once attached to a comedic version back in the late 90s that would have turned Scott Carey's existential nightmare into a family-friendly laugh fest. Scripts were written, meetings were held, marketing campaigns were roughed out, but it never materialized, falling apart in pre-production like so many ambitious projects before it. Later attempts got delayed, derailed, or completely abandoned because of comparisons to Ant-Man and the sudden rise of superhero shrinking stories in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Why make a serious shrinking movie when audiences could watch Paul Rudd crack jokes while riding ants? Directors have come and gone, each with their own vision. Scripts have been written and rewritten, reworked and reimagined. Some wanted to modernize it with CGI spectacle. Others wanted to preserve the existential core while updating the effects. A few even pitched it as a horror film, leaning into body horror and cosmic dread. But nothing has stuck. Nothing has felt right. Maybe it's because the original is genuinely untouchable, a perfect storm of vision, performance, and practical effects magic that can't be replicated with green screens and motion capture. Maybe it's because its existential questions don't translate well to modern blockbuster formulas that demand clear heroes, definitive villains, and tidy resolutions. Studios want happy endings, they want sequels, they want merchandise, but The Incredible Shrinking Man offers none of that. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because some stories only work once, some magic can't be bottled twice, some films are meant to stand alone, forever shrinking into the infinite, forever unreachable, forever perfect in their singularity. The original didn't just tell a story, it captured a moment in cinema history when filmmakers were still figuring out what science fiction could be, when they were still brave enough to ask impossible questions and refuse to give easy answers. That kind of lightning doesn't strike twice. The Incredible Shrinking Man started as one man's personal nightmare and became a cinematic revolution. It proved that science fiction could ask the biggest questions while showing the smallest man. It blended philosophy and terror, beauty and dread into something that still resonates today. Behind the oversized props and tarantula battles was a story about existence itself, about what happens when you can't hold on, when you can't stop falling, when all you can do is accept the infinite unknown and keep going anyway. So which fact surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And remember, even when you're too small to be seen, you still matter. You're still part of something infinite.